Youngman Brown here. Just want to let you guys know that today's episode is part one of my conversation with the insanely talented Ali Cavanaugh. Our conversation went on a little bit longer than normal, so I wanted to let you know that we split it into two, just so that you are not too sad and unprepared whenever I cut in about 25 minutes to let you know that you'll have to tune in tomorrow to catch the rest of the episode. So with that being said, hopefully you enjoy this, the first part of my conversation with Ali Cavanaugh. And then this is the part where I say, your creative push, episode 123.
Work goes through cycles. Life goes through cycles. You have good times, and then those good times don't last, and then it changes. Change is good.
Welcome to Your Creative Push, the podcast that pushes you to pursue your creative passions. I'm your host, Youngman Brown, and my guest today is Ali Cavanaugh. Ali is an internationally represented fine artist who is known for her watercolor paintings on clay, in a process she calls modern fresco painting. Her paintings have been featured on book covers, print publications like the New York Times Magazine, American Art Collector, and American Artist Watercolor, as well as internet features such as the Huffington Post, Art Connoisseur, and Hi-Fructose. She currently lives in St. Louis, Missouri, with her husband and their 4 children. And Ali, first of all, thank you so much for coming on the show. I was wondering if maybe you could start out by telling us a little bit more about your modern fresco process.
Yeah, thank you, Youngman, for having me. I really love this show, and I think it's a great place for artists to come and be able to be encouraged by each other. So thank you.
Oh, of course. You're welcome. Thank you. That's really nice.
So my modern fresco process, or the title of that, is, it basically came from when I started watercolors on paper in 2005, 2006, and I was searching for a surface that would not have to be behind glass, because I was running into problems getting any gallery representation, because all the galleries were like, people are not collecting work behind glass right now. It's just, it reads as print, and that is not really a market that sells much. So they loved my work, but they weren't interested in it being behind glass. So that's when I set out to really find a surface that didn't have to be behind glass. And so I was doing plaster walls with trowels and stuff in our renovation of our home. And I thought, can't I just do watercolor on clay? And I started looking into that. And then I found actually an art company, it's called Ampersand Art Supply, and they make all these different panels. They make panels for, like gesso board and hardboard and pastel board and scratch board and aqua board. And I was like, what is this aqua board? And come to find out, it's a kaolin clay veneer that they put on these panels. They're really high quality, archival, and all that. And so that was a surface that I discovered, and then I started painting my watercolors on that. And the thing is that whenever people would say, oh, they're watercolors, when the galleries would say that, the people would not, it would just confuse them, because the word, I used the watercolor differently. How most people use watercolor is always understood to be sort of free flowing, all this stuff. Well, I was using it more like a egg tempera, and very controlled, tiny overlapping strokes. And I just decided at that time that it needed to be called something different, because the watercolor people weren't getting it. And then when I said they were modern frescoes, then it made sense to them, like a contemporary spin on, the old tradition of painting on plaster. And so that's where the term came from. And I've been using it ever since.
Now, when you started doing it on the kaolin clay, aside from having to kind of spell it out for people and, call it something different, were there any things that held you back in that respect of doing something that was unique and different?
It didn't hold me back at all. It actually opened up a whole new world, because when I started doing those first watercolors, I did a group of them. I did a few of them, and I took them to this gallery that was it was in Santa Fe. We were living in Santa Fe at the time, but I took these paintings on paper, and they were really excited. Right. And so they were kind of waiting for me to come back. And I came back with a couple of these paintings on the clay. And then when I came back with those, they were just like, we're getting ready to go to the Affordable Art Fair. This is in 2007. We're getting ready to go to the Affordable Art Fair in about 4 months, I think it was 4 or 5 months. How many of these can you get us? And I was like,
Wow.
I went back to the studio and just started going crazy. Got them as many as I could. I think maybe there were 8 or 10. And they took those to the Affordable Art Fair, and they came back and they were just like, you're a rock star. Everyone was freaking out about these paintings. And when can we get more? We sold them all. They sold them all and they needed more.
So exciting.
So I had to just get to work right then and produce as much as I could. And then it was kind of like led to more gallery representation. And, it just, there wasn't, that transition did not give me any problems. It was like opening a door.
So cool. Yeah. And I think that's like really cool advice for anybody really is, to try to make small tweaks, small changes and try something a little bit different. And, it might just really open up the floodgates like it did for you. I think that's really inspiring and awesome.
Yeah. And, the thing is I graduated from art school in 95 and I was painting in oil. And I was painting the same subject that I had painted for 19 years, starting from, and it was my daughter, starting from 1994 and going until late 2014. When it was in oil, it was very dark. Like the oil just had a heavy feel and I could not control the oil like I could the watercolor. And I think I'm more of a drawer and the oil was just too messy. I was never taught how to use oil the proper way. I was sort of a self-taught oil painter, but it was just very dark and heavy. I see it now and I see why I couldn't get a lot of representation. And it was amazing that I took the exact same model, the exact same composition, everything that I was doing, and I just transferred it to watercolor on white. And the world responded in such a positive way. And sometimes I think you have to take that step into doing something, just changing some little tweak with it.
Right, especially if things aren't, working, whatever working is for you, whether it's, financially or just for you, if you don't feel like you're putting yourself out there in the way that you want to, just one, small tweak, even if it seems absurd or if it seems like completely out there, just try it and like nobody has to see it, it's like you can just throw it away if it doesn't work out well, but you might as well just try something different.
Exactly.
Were there any like things that initially held you back from being creative in general and your art in general? And do you still experience any kind of resistances to this day?
I think with resistance, I was thinking about this, how, what has held me back? And I think there's a lot of things that can hold each of us back. But there was always for me family, because my husband and I got married in 94 and had our daughter in 95. And I was young. I was just, I gave birth to my daughter 3 days after I graduated from art school. So
oh, wow.
I had a family, and that was a really, I guess, easy way for me to say, I'm not getting success with my art because I've got my family and I've got to, do things for the family. And that I didn't do this consciously, but I made my family like in opposition to me creating my art. And I made it this excuse of why I wasn't succeeding. And then I committed to a show like every 2 years. Okay. So I would get everything out and I would do a show, but I didn't have like this set serious studio. I would close everything down after the show was made. And then I would start doing my other things, which were interior murals and custom sewing and teaching. And I did all of these, creative things, but there was things that were making money. And then I would, like I said, every couple of years, get everything out and do a show, do a group of paintings. Then that cycle wasn't getting me where I needed to be. But I also, once I got past that, 10 years of doing that, and then I met a mentor that showed me showed me the obvious. You're putting your family against your art. You got to make the two work together. You can't do that or you're not going to succeed. And she was just really like real with me and showed me so much. And then I was able to kind of have this breakthrough. And that was at the same time that I discovered working on watercolor. Then I could kind of get perspective as to when I started having success, I could look back and say, oh, I see the things that were holding me back. I think one big thing is that in early career, which I would say, if you go to art school and you get out of art school and you're in your early 20s, your 20s should be about playing around and experimenting with a lot of different things. And that's what I was doing in my 20s. And that's what I did for the first 10 years of my career. I was doing the things that when I was in that place, I was thinking, this isn't where I should be. I should be serious. I should be having shows every year. I should be, have all these things, right? Because we look at the people that are kind of mid-career. When we're early career, we look at the people that we know that are mid-career and we think, gosh, we should be right there. So I spent like 10 years sort of beating myself up that I'm failing and I'm not where I should be, all this stuff. And then once I got to the mid-career stage and I was able to sell a lot and be represented and like all the things that I thought I should be, I realized, well, I was never supposed to be at that place in the beginning. I was supposed to be, kind of playing around and getting a feel for who I am and all that. So I wish if I could tell my younger self something, it would be that, don't be so hard on yourself. You're where you need to be. Just keep moving forward and be adventurous and curious about a lot of different things. You'll get there. Once you do that for 10 years, then you really figure out who you are, what you want to paint or draw or sculpt or whatever, what you want to make. And then you kind of get serious about that and take that to a level of mastery.
You really nailed like just kind of human existence in general is, you're always kind of looking ahead to like where you want to be and you want to be there now. And it's like the people that are there now that you're like looking at, they put in the time that you have to put in now too, like it's really trying to enjoy that time as you're, like you said, playing around, figuring out where you want to be so that when you get there that, you're happy and you've tried everything else and, you can be steadfast in your ways.
Yeah.
And I really agree with the using, whether it's family or friends or whatever it is, it's easy to put something else as the excuse, and it can be dangerous, especially when it's, your family and pitting them against you when they're really trying to support you.
Yeah. It's the time, you have to find time. And so when life is, especially if you're trying to make money and you're, out of art school and it's like you're wondering, okay, now the world's supposed to start buying my work. Well, I think that is such a horrible way to think about it because that's not realistic. That happens to 1 in a million, maybe even if that, that sort of situation. You got to just accept that, hey, I'm like a normal person. I'm gonna have to work hard at this, to be sort of misguided or, have this illusion of like, this is how it's supposed to be because I see this in the movies and I can, it can really defeat you before you even get started to think about it that way.
Yeah, when you think that way or you have that assumption, you're setting yourself up for failure because things don't, in the natural world, things don't really go virally. They go, from a steady grind, from just, putting in hours and hours of work and dedication. And, that can be alarming to some people when they're in the middle of it and they're like, wait, why hasn't my career completely taken off and why am I not like a rock star right now? And you're just setting yourself up for failure when you do that. And
you actually you don't want it to go that way. I mean, if you look at people that are, let's just call them like a one-hit wonder, it a lot of times ends up being that if they've got some really good gimmick and they're fresh out of art school and they just go with it. They haven't built up that infrastructure inside of themselves. And then whenever you get hard times, which you will, you have to grow as an artist. Your work has to change. And then you maybe get into an era with your work that's not as likable or, you're just not hitting that groove. You don't have those small steps that what I call it just the infrastructure inside of you built up to be able to withstand the highs and lows.
Yeah. To build a big tower, you need a really good foundation. And yeah, I think people don't, when they get to that peak, they don't have that foundation under them for when things don't go right or things kind of, the world changes a little bit.
Yep.
Yeah. And then it's a really long fall down. So it is important to, build it brick by brick.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have like a worse moment, a story of a hardest time when you really struggled with resistance or anything else in your art career?
Yeah, I do. It's kind of a little bit of a story here.
We love them.
Okay. In October of 2009, I was on the cover of American Art Collector with one of my sock arm paintings that that was sort of the thing that launched me to the top, or my figures that I painted with the sock arms. And that was October 2009. And then and I was pregnant with our third child. And in December of 2009, I was entering my ninth month. So the baby was due in January. And my husband got cancer. And he, it's very scary here. We had 3 kids. I'm getting ready to have a baby. And in fact, I went into the doctor and I said, I remember it was like a Wednesday. And I said, my husband's starting chemo next week. Can I have this baby? The baby's full term. Can we get the baby out now so that he can have a few days with the baby? Because this treatment was supposed to be like the hardest of all the chemo treatments. So the doctor's like, yeah, I don't see any reason. You're already started. Let's just go speed things up. And I had a wonderful birth and all that. And then, like I said, my husband started the chemo the following week. So here I have a newborn and a husband with chemo, and I have a show scheduled. Well, this is January, so I have a full show scheduled in May. The beginning of May. It was like May 5th or something. So I have to paint an entire show, and I had 4 commissioned portraits that were going to be delivered. This was down in Texas at the same time I had this show. So it was like 25 paintings. Okay.
Yeah.
And I did it. I'm like, I know it was like being surrounded by prayers and all of that of everyone, that had to strengthen the whole situation. But I did it, and I was just like, went into like the born identity mode. I was like, we're going to get this done. And I did it. And it was, that show ended up, I think all of those pieces sold in that show. The 4 commissions I delivered were well received. The clients loved them and all that. And so you come through something like that, and I'm feeling like, I finished a marathon. I worked hard and I'm feeling good. And then 2 years later, we had another baby. This was our 4th child. And she was just, and this is the daughter that I've painted recently, all the, the 2-year-old that I painted recently. So anyway, I, got pregnant had her in the spring of 2012. And my career is like going full swing. I mean, regularly in magazines, gallery. I just can't even keep the gallery stocked. I mean, it was just a really hot time, happening time.
Oh yeah.
And I'm thinking, okay, baby, no sweat. I've done this before, right? I've done this 3 times before. So I'm going to have baby number 4.
For God's sake.
Yeah. And so I have like my 4th baby. And I mean, I've overcome like that whole family against career thing. Like I've totally worked out all the tweaks with that, and I got it down. So there are several things at play here. I mean, here I have the 4th baby, and then our first one, remember, was born in 95. So, and then our second one was 2003, and then our third one was 2010. So we like spread our first 3 out. So I essentially had 3 only children with like older helpers, right?
Right.
So this is the first time I'm entering parenthood with 2 kids close together in age. Okay. So I have Saoirse, and things are going strong, and I've committed to like, it seemed like I had 3 or 4 shows that I was committed to, like a couple of pieces, like right after I had her in the summer, a couple more pieces. Then I had a show. I had like 3 shows in the fall, September, November, and December. I had shows, and each show needed like 5 pieces. So I had a full load. Okay. I was just painting every day, all this. And then, and my daughter had just entered her senior year of high school, which this is the daughter that I've painted hundreds and hundreds of paintings of. And she and I had essentially collaborated for a whole era of work. She has this graceful presence, sort of like a dancer, and she would be able to come up with the most beautiful compositions, and I would work with her, and so I painted the paintings, but she was the muse that contributed so much, and here I'm looking at, it's her senior year of high school, and she's going to be leaving. There's going to be an end of an era here. This chapter is coming to an end, and I think that was playing too somewhere in there, is like, not really scared, but just knowing, I guess, having the maturity, that infrastructure, that knowing that it's a cycle. this is going to come to an end, but something better is going to come, out of this. So, I'm going to enter into a new chapter that's going to be really beautiful and amazing. I just have to trust that. Right. So, out of nowhere, I was going along pretty good through the summer painting. Out of nowhere, I get postpartum depression. And that, I've never judged people with depression. I've never really known anyone close with depression, but it snuck up on me and I didn't really know what happened. And I just was like, why do I feel like this empty shell just walking around? And I felt so overwhelmed at like every little thing and just completely, there are no words for it.
Yeah.
Anyone that has had depression knows what I'm talking about. Now I know, what it feels like. And it hit me hard. And but I still kept painting. I still kept, going to the easel every day, getting my work done, forging through it. And then it didn't last for more than about 4 months. And I was able to recover from it. And it was like going into winter that year. And it was like
the perfect storm.
Yeah, the perfect storm. But, and that confidence that you get, like when I had all of that stuff with my husband having cancer and the new baby and all that, I did that fine because I didn't have that overshadowing of depression. But it's like, gosh, I'm telling you what, it is difficult and it's very, very hard. So you just have to like be able to talk to people that you can trust and, sometimes you need medicine. Don't get yourself in a place where you're so prideful. It's like, I don't need that, and get yourself even deeper, but I worked through it and when the spring, the winter started turning spring, I was pretty much completely out of the woods and I kind of picked up and, was able to have a really optimistic attitude about, the work, where it was going, how my daughter was going to college, all those things that come at play, like your oldest leaving the nest. And,
right.
And so I say that was that was kind of the hardest thing that I had to go through with my work.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And for people listening, it's not, like you said, it's not, your fault. It's not so many of the things that happen in life. It's just a changing of seasons. It's life changes and moods change and things happen,
Yeah.
And it's not your fault. And I love that you were able to push through it. Did it affect your art at all? Did your art style kind of change and the way that you painted change?
I think what it did for me is, if you look at my work, especially if you go back to, there's my new website is alliecavanaugh.com, but then my old website that I had, alliecavaugharchives.com, you will see a pretty heavy duty perfectionist. And I think that I had, so much control over my work, and my work had gotten to a place, even if you see the work progress through the years, you can see it the palettes got more complex. The technique got so refined that I feel like I had gotten my work to a place that was like super, super concentrated. And I was working in a little bedroom, like a 10-foot by 12-foot bedroom. That was my studio amongst toys, Legos, baby jumpers. Like it was I had seriously like a 5-foot by 5-foot space that I was working in.
Yeah.
And so my work could not go big, and it was little, and it was what would fit on the easel. And because I couldn't go bigger, I just went just more complex with everything, especially my palettes and my lighting and all that. So it became like this kind of house of cards that I was building. I kind of look at it like that, or this, just fragile thing that I had added to, and I had gotten to a point to where I was almost a prisoner in this work. And it was lining up with, when my daughter's going to leave. And like, I just knew this is going to just fall. This has to collapse at some point in here, because I just can't keep on in this way. And I think it was part of what we know when we've done this enough for a long enough time, you realize that your work goes through cycles. Life goes through cycles. You have good times, and then those good times don't last, and then it changes, and change is good. And it's good to kind of accept those changes with optimism instead of just always mourning what was, the loss of what was, and all that. So it's like I had to let all that go. And that was kind of the year of 2015 was my transition year. And the 2014 was my last year to make the paintings. That's when a lot of black backgrounds entered. I went from white to black. And then in early 2015, I thought, okay, Neve's no longer here. And then when she would come to visit, Neve's my daughter, my oldest daughter, when she would come to visit, there just wasn't that magic there anymore. It was like the chapter had really closed. And so I looked to Saoirse, who was then 2, and I just did like a first painting of her that I titled Lost. And I put it out there on social media and my Facebook and everything. And the response was incredible. It was like the world just celebrating, like, Allie, yes, this is so cool. Do this. That was kind of what I heard back. And then it was like, wow, I think I have a new journey with Saoirse. And then that led to me kind of changing up my techniques and loosening up, not being so controlled. I ordered like way bigger panels and decided I'm going to go big with her. I'm going to be loose. I'm going to just sort of rebel against that old, not rebel against it, but just actually I tell people I had to be able to do the loose paintings that I'm doing now. I had to do 7 years of these very meticulous paintings because that skill really built up. So then when I'm, working with the water in big puddles and stuff, I can move it and control it. And I know what I'm trying to get, what I'm trying to achieve to capture that sort of a real, unique presence of a person.
And that is where we are going to end part 1 of my conversation with Allie Cavanaugh. I just want to say thank you, Allie, for being so honest and open about a really tough time. And I know it's not easy to talk about things like this, and that's why I'm just so, honored to have, people like Allie who are just really brave and just willing to really open up about their personal lives, about the really deep struggles that we experience as human beings and that we can all relate to in one way or another, sometimes very specifically and intimately. We all have things that come up in life. We all have difficult times, and like Allie was saying, there's some times in life where, you're supposed to just have a really tough time, but you're able to power through it like a superhero. And then there's other times where, you're an old pro and things just creep up and it's much more difficult and there's no explanation for it sometimes. That's just the way it is, but it's okay. It's not your fault. It's just trying to push through it. That's the really important lesson, and we're going to get into more of that in part 2. And I don't want to steal Allie's thunder because she really has a great outlook on when these kinds of things come up. So I'll save that for you for tomorrow. But I just want to say that, if you are going through things, just hang in there, and use your art, use your creativity, use whatever your creative function is to help you to get through that and to pull you through it. Just know that there is an end to it. It's just getting through it, and we are here to help you as well. So that is all we've got for you today. I hope you enjoyed the first part of my conversation with Allie, and definitely tune in tomorrow to catch the conclusion. But until then, hopefully you're inspired to go and get your work done. So go and get it done, and we will see you tomorrow if you need the push again. Have a great day, everybody, and we'll see you then. Bye. Never miss a push. Head to yourcreativepush.com/subscribe to find the easiest way for you to subscribe to the podcast.